Hi there and welcome to the UTI Mutual Fund Swatantra series powered by ET Now. I'm so glad you joined us. We have a wonderful episode lined up for you today and it's very, very interesting because our audience is very interesting. This episode is targeted at doctors. Now you'd think, obviously, because of the very important work that they do, doctors either have somebody else to manage their money or that since they're such brilliant people anyways, that it must be really easy for them. Well, in our conversations before the show started, we discovered that doctors, like everybody else, find planning their finances very, very challenging. So we put together this show. So if at home you are a doctor or someone in your family is a doctor, sit them down or write down some of the advice you hear on the show today and give it to them so you can help them out just like they help us every day. If you want more information about the show, we have a website that's on your screen right now, indiainvestkaro.com. All you have to do is get on that website. You'll find videos, you'll find information on how to invest in a mutual fund, and you can reach us with a question if you'd like to be part of the show. Joining me in the studio to answer the questions we have, ladies first, Swati Kulkarni is Executive Vice President and Fund Manager Equities at UTI AMC. And of course, Gajendra Kothari is MD and CEO at Ertica Wealth Management. I'm so glad to have both of you in. And, you know, our audience wouldn't know the conversation we were having before the show started. But it was eye-opening for me that while it's true that doctors have to spend a lot of their time with their patients, there's also this whole other side of managing a business. So, in effect, they're each entrepreneurs when they're running their own practices. So, there's a lot more they have to think of as opposed to an average salaried professional. Swati, do you think that the advice that we normally give to an entrepreneur would apply to a doctor as well?
Yeah, I think so, because, you know, the overall, ultimately you are building some corpus and you need to satisfy the financial liabilities that they may have towards the family or towards the profession. So you have to create resources for satisfying those and achieving a financial goal. So it's just a question of understanding what the financial goals are, quantifying them, and then working towards it.
Gajendra, you're an entrepreneur yourself.
Yes.
So when you're looking at a business, it's not, I mean, one aspect of it is obviously how do I invest and secure my family's future, because you're taking on a personal risk when you start your own business.
True.
There's no salary to guarantee, every month. But the other thing to consider is just the finances of the business. So every time I come into some money, do I reinvest it in my own business or do I invest it for my future? How does an average entrepreneur or a doctor like the ones we have in our audience today make that choice?
Yeah, that's very true, Faye. Just like any entrepreneur, the first basic aim is that how can I grow my business, and you start putting in as much as possible, and there's never end to it, So that is where as a financial advisor can come and help you to demarcate your professional setup and your personal assets, because you would also have personal goals like marriage, children's education, your retirement, And most of the time I've seen entrepreneurs putting all their money into their business. So it's like the entire eggs are in one basket.
That's the baby.
That's the baby. And sometimes you drop the baby, into the cold water. So it's very important, So we say, look, I agree that in the initial stage, a lot of money will go into your professional setup. But at least 10-20% you should start putting aside for your retirement or for other things from diversification point of view. What if tomorrow the practice doesn't work out? So, at least you have something to stand by upon. And that's where a financial advisor can give you a very objective view that how you should do it, how you should plan for it, and, handhold you in the entire process, actually.
Actually, I'm going to take that one step further. And obviously, the other question will be paying off loans.
Yes.
Because I might take a loan for the space that my business is operating in. I might have taken a loan for my studies or whatever it is, especially if I'm a doctor. What percentage of my take home every month should the loan be capped at?
Okay. So normally all these loan companies, banks, would not give you more than 40% of your EMI, what you pay of your income. They won't give you a loan more than that because they want to show that you are able to service of the loan very well. But as a financial advisor, we always recommend if you are paying a loan, so you may be paying 10%, 11%, then you may be doing some other investments also. If that other investment is into, let's say, a bank fixed deposit, which is earning you 8% and you're paying loan at 10%, then it doesn't make sense to do that deposit in the first place. You might pay off your loan first and then. On the other hand, if you're doing this investment in equity kind of thing for your retirement, wherein you can expect 12, 14, 15% return on your investments, that is certainly much higher than what you're paying off the loan. There's an arbitrage you're making. So that is when we say, look, this money can go into equity and this money should be paying off into debt. So the break even is if the asset class which is earning more than what you're paying on the loan, you must invest there a part of money. Otherwise, you should pay off the loan as soon as possible.
You know, one great example to illustrate this is the fact that when you do a fixed deposit, you effectively lend money to the bank and the bank gives you an interest. And then you borrow that same money back and you pay the bank a higher interest. So you tell the bank, take my money at 8%, and then you borrow it, same money back at 10%. So you're just paying an extra 2% for no reason whatsoever. And then automatically you should be looking at your portfolio saying, this should cancel this out. And that's one less thing I have to worry about.
Been there for around 500 years.
From this arbitrage.
So, Faye, I would like to add one more point here is that, it is possible that, and it is always, in past we have seen that equity turns out to be a much better asset class on a long-term basis. So when you're looking at this kind of comparison, it may happen that in the short term you may feel that equity is not giving you return and hence, it is not a good way to park your money at, and it's better to repay the loan, but that may not be the case. So, equity returns could be non-linear. It could be first 3 years you may not get any return, but the returns can come back-ended. And that can give more than the returns which other asset classes can give. So one need to have that aspect in mind while you're planning your finances.
The other thing I want to ask you, Swati, that you're here and you're a representative of the industry at this point. A lot of the doctors I have met have always told me that when they meet an advisor, they meet someone who's giving them counsel, the tendency is to suggest very complex products. So they suggest complex stocks, so they suggest a product where you punt on this sector and you do this and you move money here and you move money there. And invariably, because it's a profession that demands so much time and the individual does not have the attention to give that investment, they wind up burning their fingers and saying, I will never invest in equity again. A raise of hands, who has that happened to? So that's almost everybody. And I blame the industry for creating such a plethora of complicated products. Is it possible for, irrespective of the age group we're talking about, for me to pick a simple mutual fund that I do an SIP, irrespective of whether I'm a doctor or I'm an engineer or I'm an entrepreneur, the simplest product will be able to do the trick that you just talked about? Is it necessary to be, to pick the complicated products as well?
First of all, I don't think it is necessary to pick up the complicated product. The complication can come because mutual funds also evolve and there'll be a lot more, savvy investors who want a typical exposure. They want a typical theme exposure. So the complication in the product could be because the way industry is evolving. What I feel is typically rather than, comparing different products and getting confused, even if you select a diversified equity fund, whichever fund you have, a pure vanilla fund, that will do good as well, what we're talking about. But you have to be a long-term investor. Even if you make returns in last 1 year, let's say the returns have been fantastic, but you need to, look at the long-term appeal of this asset class as such.
I'm not going to ask Swati because she manages a few of those diversified equities. But I will ask Gajendra. Don't recommend a fund. Give me a checklist. So for everybody who's sitting here, if they were to go home today and take Swati's advice and pick a fund, pick one fund or two funds and invest in it, how do I choose those two funds? What is the criteria?
Brilliant question, So, as I said, simplicity is the best form of, in anything actually, it works wonderful. Even in investments, we always suggest investors to keep it simple. And that is why these kind of investor education programs helps to get that clarity. Because today we see a lot of complex things coming out. So we always say in your investments, you have to have just three things, So investments can be short term, medium term and long term. If it is a short term, your money has to be safe. So your money cannot take any risk. Liquidity is of prime importance. Stay with safe investments like fixed deposits, savings account or debt funds, If it is a long term, like 10 years kind of thing, and you can take risk in the interim, like, your money can go up and down, but in the long term, it will definitely give you better return than inflation, which is your benchmark. Then stay with a good equity fund. Now, many people want to go for different equity funds, but just plain vanilla diversified equity fund will do the trick. The last 20-25 years track record shows they can easily give you 20% return, for the last 20 years. I think which is more than enough. we just, for that extra 2%,
So how do we pick that plain vanilla equity diversified fund from all of the various options? Because there are different companies, each company has different funds.
Right.
So how do I choose the one fund that I want to
the
invest
simplest
in?
yardstick is to see the track record. The longer the track record and the consistent the track record, I think 90% of your work is done. So if some fund has given 21% in 20 years and someone has given 20 years, it really doesn't matter. You would have to have stayed there for this long to earn. Many people I find comparing that 1% extra and will not invest because they want to earn more, and they lose the trick.
Actually, the other risk that a lot of investors run is comparing apples and oranges. So you take a banking fund and you compare it with an equity diversified fund. That's an unfair comparison. They couldn't possibly give you the same return. So it's very easy to do online right now. You take a fund. Every fund has a category average, which is the absolute middle performance of that particular type of funds. So all of them together, this is the middle ground, the average performance. So you should always be better than the average in a good market. And when the market is bad and the average has fallen, you should have fallen less than the average. So that will show you a good fund. And a good fund is something that can keep up that for 10 years. That's a fund that you can rely on, that both of the advice that both of our guests have given us will fit if you pick a fund based on the categories that we've just given you. All right, I'm told we have to take a very quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear personal stories from our audience and questions that we'll try and answer. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching the UTI Mutual Fund Swatantra series powered by ET Now. Thank you for staying with us. We're having a conversation with a group of doctors about managing their money, and we're finding out very, very interesting things about the profession. We have personal stories and questions. The young man in the front, tell us. Is it difficult to manage your money as a doctor?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Tell us why.
Because we are not, we lack the knowledge for finance and investment. That is the basic reason. We are more into studies and less into finance. I just wanted to ask a question. What do you mean by short term, medium term and long term in as far as duration is concerned? And other thing is, where do you put insurance, life insurance, endowment plans or some money back plans into these?
So these are two different questions from that point of view. Very simple. Now, short term, medium term, and long term would differ from person to person at times. There's no standard definition. But just to give you a thumb rule, what we consider is if anything is below 3 years, the requirement or goal, then it should be a short term. If something is between 3 to 5 years, it's a medium term investment, and above 5 years, it's a long term. Now, above 5 years, most money should be in equity, and below 5 years, most money should be in a safe kind of asset. Now, why? At times I've been asked that equity is very risky. I shouldn't take that kind of risk. It's for my retirement or for my child's education. I'll just give a very simple example. See, when you drive a car, if you have to go from here to, let's say, a close by station, or we just drive at 20 kilometer speed, But if you have to go from here to New Bombay, it would be around 80 kilometer per hour. But if you have to drive the same car from here to Delhi, you would be driving at 120, 130 kilometer. The car is the same, but the speed differs, because the distance is long. That's how the asset allocation also works. So in the short term, you can't take risk. Your money has to be safe.
So normally when you buy a product in the market, you flip it over and see, is this good for 6 months? You should use it within a week of opening. And since we have the producer of the product right here, Swati, tell us this. Ideally, if I were to invest in your fund tomorrow, how long do you want me to stay invested to be able to make the most of the efforts that you put in?
Well, I'll always say that you stay as long as possible, but I'll just want to, add
Quantify
another
for us,
perspective on this is probably it will be easier for you to link these short and medium if you look back into your liabilities. For example, if you have some payments coming across within a year, you wouldn't like to risk that into equity market, or if you have some, next 2 years you're planning building a house and you need some upfront money for that perhaps you wouldn't keep risking into equity. So you will have to link your requirements and decide what is so it can be a ultra short term product, can be 6 months, when I say ultra short term, it's a typical liquid product from mutual fund. You might be there invested for 15 days, you might be there for 6 months. It all depends on how your liabilities are going to be. So you have some, you can make that extra bit of money even on the 6 months horizon, rather than putting it into an SB account of a bank. So that should be the mindset when you look at these different products.
Kajendra, do you want to very quickly tackle the insurance question?
Oh, yes. We always recommend that don't mix insurance with investments. Insurance is protection, you know. You buy insurance, you never invest in insurance. So the first thing I would always request all of you to go and buy a term insurance. That's the only insurance cover you should ever buy. In that insurance, you pay very little premium every year for a huge sum assured. For the next 20 or 30 years till when you are insured, if anything happens to you, your nominee gets that sum assured. So just to give you a quick example, I have a 6 crore insurance cover. I'm paying 70,000 annual premium for the next 30 years. If nothing happens to me, every year I'll be losing or forfeiting this 70,000 premium. But in the next 30 years, if anything happens to me, my wife gets 6 crore amount, which is quite a decent. So I'm giving her a peace of mind to my family, you know. कि कल को मुझे कुछ हो जाए तो I don't have to worry. So buy that because your parents and your family have spent a huge amount on you in the terms of investments, and now it's time for you to repay. Something were to happen to you, the entire thing can go for a toss. So buy term insurance. Then you should have a health insurance cover separately, obviously, you know. And third is this thing. So don't buy endowment plans because this is insurance plus investments. 30 years you have to invest. At the end of the day, you get only 5 or 6% kind of return. So it's neither you're adequately insured nor you're invested properly. So endowment or money back doesn't make sense. Stick to term insurance. Rest all investments should be either in your fixed deposits or PPF or equity, depending on what your goals are.
All right, I'm told we have to take another very quick break, but when we come back, we'll hear from the ladies in the audience who have questions for our guests. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching the UTI Mutual Fund Swatantra series. This is an investor education initiative powered by ET Now. Thank you for staying with us. Remember, if you have a question for us, if you're at home, you can join us on our website. That's at the bottom of your screen, or you can tweet out your question as well. It'll be our pleasure to hear from you. And if you'd like to join us in the studio, you're always welcome. All you have to do is reach out. I have time for a couple of questions. There's a young lady in the front. Go ahead.
Hi, my question to you all is, considering the lack of time we have in following all these things and, like, you know, tracking these equities, whatever, how they rise and fall, it's a safer bet to go in for a mutual fund where you know you're giving your money to someone who knows where they're putting it. So my question is there a starting point, as in where we can look to? Because when I read about these mutual funds, there are some balanced equity, debt, we don't understand any of those. And if you sit reading, then you forget what was the previous one about. So is there any starting point? And also, once we give it the money to a mutual fund, is there any period we have to look to withdraw? If you all say the minimum period is 3 years, are we rest assured that for 3 years that money should be there, or should we be thinking about withdrawing that money at any point of time within those 3 years?
When a patient comes to you as a patient, you would understand what is a diagnosis. You would just do a diagnosis, and then you may recommend a particular medicine from a particular company. This is how the advisor also works. So when an advisor comes to you and he analyzes your situation, your financial position, and then would recommend you what kind of equity product or debt product would be there, and he will choose from those 45 companies based on what fits you, know. So it's exactly like a doctor, the way doctor works.
How allergic you are to risk.
Sorry? Yeah.
Actually, that is one good point.
So and financial advisor would know exactly when is your next goal coming and where that money should be going. You don't have to really track. The advisor will do it for you. And when the time comes for you to withdraw, he will do the withdrawal for you, and the money will come to your bank account, you know. So you focus on your work, and the advisor will take care of your finances. That's how the process works.
I want you to explain risk a little bit, because I might have 10 years, but I might not have the heart for it. Yeah. So how do I decide whether or not I want to?
Very interesting point that you have brought in, Faye. Risk is, you know, willingness of the risk and the ability to take risk. So willingness, as you said, you may not have the heart to take the risk. You know, but you probably just take an example that you might be earning some amount, right? You know, on a monthly basis. So that becomes your fixed earnings, or, you know, the money which could be available to tap whenever you need. But of that, there could be some portion which you are, because of your financial condition, you are ready to take risk, and that portion you could take an equity product as we were just suggesting. You may not need a short-term product at all because you have a fair amount of visibility of your earnings, how much per month you're going to get. So you might just put maybe 20-30% of your earnings into a long-term corpus building. So for example, I'll give you an example, 20,000 rupees of an SIP for 5 years, even if it earns about 12%, you are generating about 18 lakhs of corpus in 5 years. And 12% is not a very high number for equity markets on a 5-year perspective. So, you could think from that perspective rather than getting, I would say, entangled in this web of so many products and things like that.
But the fundamental rule of investing is keep it simple. If there's a product that you don't understand, it seems complicated, just avoid it. There's no reason to buy a product for whatever reason if you don't understand it. If you think it's too complicated, I don't understand how this product works, there are two things you have to understand. What is the risk? What is the return to expect? If for some reason you can't understand these two things, just avoid that product. It's not worth the trouble. I want to take another question from the young lady in the front.
Shweta, yeah. Just one question. Suppose I'm earning 30,000 per month. How much do I start investing and when do I start investing? Suppose this is my second year in my practice. So when do I start investing and what is the amount which I start investing with?
See, this is a good question.
So I'll advise you, doctor. So what happens, doctor, when an advisor meets you, he tries to analyze complete financial situation of yours. So he would ask you what are your cash flows, how much you're getting per month, and what are your expenses, what then is your surplus, okay? In that surplus, what all investments you're doing, you've been doing a recurring deposit or insurance premium, minus that or in EMI, then you will have some surplus left. Then I'll ask you what are your priorities in terms of goals. He says, look, I may want to go for foreign vacation 2 years down the line, okay? So that would require X amount of money. So this is my priority right now, okay? So you say if this is a priority and 2 years is your time frame, then most of your money will go into a safe thing, which will give you 9% or so and help you plan your travel. So this is how we bucket your goals and then put certain money into each bucket, And you may have different priorities, but your financial advisor may warn you that, okay, if you don't plan for your retirement now, and you ask me a question, when should I start? We always recommend the time to start is now. Don't delay. You may start with 1,000 or 10,000, amount doesn't really matter. It's that discipline and that, the pig-headed focus, that is what it will take you actually. So
actually the power of compounding works very well over a period of time. Like, whatever 10% return, if it is earned over 10 years and earned over 20 years, the amount that you generate would be substantially different. So that is one thing. And in terms of, you said that maybe house or any travel, which Garendra just mentioned, it could be that you want to buy a capital equipment for your dispensary maybe. So you will have to think in terms of today what is the cost, and you are planning to buy that 5 years down the line. So what is going to be the inflation around it, like what the cost might go up. So it might be 1 lakh costing today, might be 1.3 would be the cost. So you will have to work backwards then if you want to calculate take a loan around 5 years, after 5 years, what's going to be your investment that is required and whether you can do that at this point of time. And then, financial advisor will tell you how the asset allocation should be, how much you should be putting in equity, how much in balance fund and things like that. So you will, once you fix up your plan and you are also part of that process, you will have a lot more clarity than, thinking about it and not getting into it at all.
Just one thing I wanted to add here. Most of the doctors, when we meet, we find they do ad hoc investments, As and when the money has come, they just buy what is the flavor of the season. You would always find a bank relationship manager coming to you because he knows what balance you have in the account and says, so this is a good product for you. And because you don't have time, you just go for it. Please don't do that.
I just want to add to what he's saying, and this is a really important thing. Just like you do not recommend that anybody self-medicates, because I think I understand what I have, I'll just take whatever's in the cabinet. Same thing, you should not be choosing your investments without advice. You have to seek advice, and you have to seek advice from someone who knows your history. So it has to be someone you meet on a regular basis who knows what your plans are in the future, what you're allergic to, what you had in the past. So somebody who can take you through all of that. not some guy who's come in from your bank because he knows some money has hit your account. He is the person you should not trust. You should trust the person who will only give you advice and who has nothing to gain from what you buy. And there are now advisors and there are distributors who should be able to tell the difference between the two. So the advice is an absolute must. And you should choose your advice like you would choose a family doctor. All right, so we'll have to continue this conversation off camera because we've run out of time on this show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, doctors, for coming in. It was a pleasure to spend time with you. But Swati and Gajendra, it's always a pleasure to chat with you on this show. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, IndiaInvestGuru.com is where you can find us, or you can tweet out a question if you'd like. Get in touch. It'll be our pleasure to hear from you. Thanks for watching.
Brought to you by UTI Mutual Fund. हक एक बेहतर जिंदगी का.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all the scheme-related documents carefully.